everyone, and welcome to a very special episode of Soundtrack. We're going to be talking Film Nerd Christmas, or rather, the 2018 Oscar nominations. My name is Alexandra Bohannon, and I'm so glad that this year's Oscars aren't already a locked contest.
Thank God. Isn't it exciting?
Yeah.
This really feels like Christmas because we don't know what's going to be on Christmas morning. We don't know what's going to be inside.
We're not just being shoveled The Revenant over and over again for every race. But absolutely, you can hear I'm not alone. Sir, what's your name, and introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Caleb Masters. I am the editor-in-chief of thecinematropolis.com and your voice of the Cinematic Schematic.
Fantastic. Well, thank you again for joining me, Caleb, on this very special episode. I know we've done a lot of soundtracking this month already with our soon-to-be-dropped show over Prestige Pictures, not necessarily Academy beloveds, but the Prestige picture in general. And, of course, with the Cinematic Schematic bonus talk about just the Oscar nominees in general and our reactions and all of that for that show. But this show is actually just going to be about the specifically 2018 scores nominated for Best Score for the Oscars. Since our time here is really short, we're just going to jump right in. Leading us into the show is a theme I'm sure you all recognize, especially if you were watching movie trailers from about March until July, and that's Hans Zimmer's incredible Dunkirk soundtrack, of course, directed by the incomparable Christopher Nolan. Specifically, we brought in the show with track 4, which is Supermarine. Caleb, what do you think about this particular track?
Oh my God, this is great. This is great. Okay, so Dunkirk was a great film, and I saw it in 70 millimeter when it came out last summer. I was very fortunate that Oklahoma City, our hometown, had
randomly had it.
It randomly had it. It was great. And I liked the movie a lot when I saw it, but I don't know if it was because I was tired or what the deal was. I walked out feeling pretty good about it, but the score didn't stand out to me. But I saw it a second time, like 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And it floored me.
Really?
The whole movie just landed way better. I don't know what it was, the whole experience, because it was
That's
one
awesome.
of those. It was one of those when I saw the movie, I was walking away thinking, I mean, I like that a lot, but I feel like it should land better. Second time, totally landed better.
That's awesome.
Because the way, like the way the score utilizes the ticking of a clock.
Oh yeah.
Like it's if you boil down pretty much any song in the score, like you can hear the ticking. Like,
yeah.
And the score, it's so freaking cool. And this is like one of the most climactic pieces where you're just like on the edge of your seat and like planes are going down or
no, I mean, and I picked one. I tried to go through whenever I did my process for picking these particular tracks from the score. I tried to pick a track that would epitomize this particular soundtrack to me and what I felt like this score brought to the table and what it was doing different and what it wasn't. And I felt like this track specifically really epitomized the kind of mechanical sound. Of course, you got that Hans Zimmer bomb in there, which is it's funny because like that was such a trend for such a long time in scoring, and now just hearing Zimmer do it again is really just
because Zimmer's always been good.
No,
at
he's
it.
always
it's
done
always
it.
the knockoffs that have been really
right.
bad.
You know, or Metal Gear Solid, or what would it be? Like any like of those like Space Marine AAA games would always have those like bomb, you know, scores to them.
Yeah, no, actually, he does it so well, and it fits the way the score for this film really picked. I mean, I just feel like it epitomizes the personality of this film, which is it's loud, it's intense, it's a ride that doesn't ever let go.
That's
but
true.
It still feels kind of classy in a weird sort of way.
Yeah.
It's hard to, I don't know. I think it really captures what works about Dunkirk.
Yeah, and one thing that's really interesting to me about this particular track, so we just played you a short little sample from it. The full track is 8 minutes long.
Oh my God. Yes.
In that rhythm of the clock and the mechanical noises, that's the entire time. So imagine just for 8 solid minutes, you're hearing that particular rhythm, and it only just amps up until we hear that climax that we listened to just a little bit earlier. So it's almost a solid 8 minutes with only one tiny little break where it just stops, and then it's just like, it starts again at a much higher level. It's a truly incredible way to drum up tension and the anxiety that just drives that film and makes it really scary and meaningful. I left that theater knowing like, oh my God, of course, I've never been to war. You know, I know that this is a fraction about war would be like, but this is the closest I've been to war because how loud the soundtrack was, how loud like the score was on top of just the sound design, and how you're just terrified the entire time. And that's what like war and being in Dunkirk at this point in history was like for these soldiers. And I just thought that was an incredible use of the scoring, just to amplify all of those themes and that heighten that tension and anxiety factor.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, it's so good.
It's a ride. I'm telling you what, like that movie is 2 hours. And the thing is, there's always a score playing too. There's very, very, very few. There's like, you can count them on one hand, like just truly silent moments in that film.
Yes.
And I just think Hans Zimmer's score, it just takes you on a ride. And I think that's what this movie does. More than anything, it's a ride, it's a war film, and it encapsulates what war is. No, there's not necessarily there's a lot of things that we're used to seeing in Nolan movies that are not present, but I think for here, this is Nolan executing spectacle in a way that is still meaningful. It's not hollow, at all.
It is not.
And I feel like it lands the spectacle stuff so ridiculously well, but while also just getting fundamentally great storytelling.
Caleb, we must maintain our breakneck pace and move on since we've got 5 whole scores to cover.
5 more scores?
Well, not an additional 5, it's 4, but
4
you know
more
what
scores?
I mean. Yeah.
What?
Yeah, so the second score, I feel like it also doesn't need an introduction. And again, if you've been watching movie trailers and haven't been hiding in a cave for 2 years, you'll recognize it. That's right. This is the inimitable John Williams with his Last Jedi score, specifically track 13, The Sacred Jedi Texts. This is actually our first discussion of John Williams here on Soundtrack.
What?
Yes, I actually a little floored about that. I found that very notable, and some of that actually, and I think you mentioned this a bit to me earlier. For me, Williams is kind of hard to talk about in some ways due to that prolific career of his. So when I was pulling this segment together, I wanted us to talk specifically about a track that wasn't the opening crawl or an Imperial March or anything that was iconically created in, 70s Star Wars. And so I liked this particular track, the 13, the Jedi Text, because it has elements of those themes and some of the major Star Wars types of riffs within it, but it still stands on its own 2 feet. And I feel like it's a great example of what the different levels Williams can do. And that's why I really like this track. But I know that you have some feelings about this nomination for Mr. Williams.
2017 was just an incredible year for film. And
oh, yeah.
I love John Williams. He has given us so much. And, I mean, I'm never going to deny the man a nomination, but he's been nominated more than probably anyone in history for Oscars. And I don't feel like his work on any of either this movie or The Force Awakens has been particularly strong. I do like this one, the piece you selected but it's because it has elements of the original Luke Skywalker theme, and it does put a certain somber twist on it that I appreciate to kind of highlight where we're at in the film, which is really cool. So I appreciate that about it. But I'll tell you what, and maybe I'm just getting old and curmudgeon or something.
Definitely.
My criticism...
Sorry.
You're not wrong.
Crusty Caleb.
You're not wrong. But I said this when The Force Awakens came out and I saw it. And I liked that film too. I think Last Jedi is a lot better, but I liked that film enough at the time. But my something I noticed was that I couldn't just summon a tune from the movie to hum, which for Star Wars is a big deal. And I think it's the same about The Last Jedi. All the big musical moments in this film that really rung true with me were movements from the older films. Like my favorite movie moment, spoilers for The Last Jedi, is at the end when the Millennium Falcon shows up at the very end, and there's like a really great music cue where they throw you back to a track from the asteroid field. Mm-hmm. And the asteroid field, like there's like multiple movements. There's multiple movements within that entire section of the film. That's my favorite. Among my favorite Star Wars music ever. But again, it's like harkening back to my favorite ever. And I don't know. Last Jedi, I think had an okay score. Mm-hmm. I feel like John Williams is getting nominated because he's John Williams.
Sure.
Again, it's not a bad score. It's John Williams. It's good. Like
sure.
Inherently, it's good. But I don't feel like he's really adding much to Star Wars, new to Star Wars. And I can think back to the prequels. The prequels might have a lot of criticisms, but I can tell you what. I can tell you Battle for the Heroes from Episode 3. I can hum the romantic tune between Anakin and Padme, and I sure as hell can go do 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 do. You know, like that's I can hum those tunes are like instant.
You can summon the Cantina theme and play it on recorder or something.
Right. I can't think of a single theme from this movie that is original to this movie that I just it catches my mind. There are good movements. I think the track you selected was a very good one from the film.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it was used extensively in the trailers and the marketing. I felt like it kind of did a good job at like epitomizing what The Last Jedi was in a film. You have these kind of nostalgic swells, but yet so we're not ready to give up the whole way of the Jedi, and we're still contemplating it, and it's kind of melodic and a bit somber. But I wanted to regale you with some Oscar facts about John Williams because I am actually curious.
Please do.
So his first nomination was in 1967 for Valley of the Dolls.
Yep.
His most recent was obviously 2017. I'm not going to count all these, but this is at least 30 nominations probably. He's only won 5 times though.
Fair point.
But he won for Jaws, Star Wars, Fiddler on the Roof, E.T., and Schindler's List. His last win was Schindler's List in 1993. So it's been a while.
He's done some A+ scores.
He
since then.
didn't win for Sorcerer's Stone.
He didn't win?
That's a travesty.
Damn,
like I have mixed feelings about the movies, but one thing I can say for a fact as a true Harry Potter fan is that is an iconic score.
Oh, yeah.
You play that Hedwig's theme, you know what movie you're watching.
Right.
And it's sad that we got some of these established themes for like E.T. and we got it for Star Wars and we got it for Jaws, but we didn't get it for Harry Potter, and that's become extremely iconic.
Jurassic Park, man, that's another good one.
Yeah, and that one didn't either. Yeah,
Jurassic Park,
Indiana Jones,
Catch
neither.
Me If You Can. Oh, man. God, he's done so many good scores.
Yeah, so I mean, he did win for Star Wars though. Yes. So he's already won for Star Wars. Do we need to nominate him for more Star Wars? Whenever it's all kind of manipulations of existing ideas.
Again, I would say if this was a score that was like Empire Strikes Back or The Phantom Menace or Revenge of the Sith, movies aside, like the scores in those are incredible. But that's the thing. I don't think this is the one that deserves it.
Sure.
But again, to your point though, the Academy loves to do this all the time. Let's give it to the guy because he's John Williams.
John Williams is the Meryl Streep of scores.
Yes.
That's John Williams. And he did, and regardless of, do we agree that his nomination this year, I mean, Caleb, if you had to pick one of our amazing films, because 17 was a blockbuster
God, it was such an
year
incredible
for
year.
the film. Just incredible. What would you pick if you had one?
I will answer that question before the end of the podcast.
Okay. Well, let's move on, because we've got still 3 more soundtracks to cover. So, got to keep this train moving. For a complete change of pace, here's our 3rd Oscar-nominated score for 2018. The mandolin-driven score of Carter Burwell for 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. This track is specifically 13 Billboards on Fire. I wonder what happens in the movie.
On fire!
Yeah. Caleb, do you have any thoughts about this particular piece?
It's funny. The film I have the lowest opinion of all the nominees this year is 3 Billboards. But the score is freaking great.
It is really wonderful.
Great. It as soon as it starts playing, it clicks, and it does a really good job capturing how you imagine like the fierce Midwest. It kind of captures, again. It does a good job at capturing the personality of the film. And I would, the score is so. I think it just goes further to show that the score is really important to defining the personality of the film, because between this and Dunkirk, like when I hear the score, I'm like, oh yeah, this feels like it's the movie. Like it feels like
exactly.
It fits what they're doing,
Yeah, and that's, those are some great hallmarks of excellent composing, is whenever you're just, hashtag nailing it in terms of like whenever you are fully conveying the tone that we're experiencing on film, and whenever it's enhanced and amplified throughout the score. So I had to remind myself on the prolific career of Carter Burwell, because I know he scored the Twilight films, and I was like, hard to put my finger on what else he did. Mostly what he's done, not mostly, but a lot of what he's done, 15 Coen Brothers pictures. So he did. He's done 15 Coen Brothers. He's done all 3 films of Martin McDonagh. For In Bruges, 7 Psychopaths, and of course 3 Billboards. And then he's also done Being John Malkovich, Adaptation, Where the Wild Things Are, and Anomalisa. So scoring 15 Coen Brother films, I feel like the choices of having, Carter Burwell's already proven himself to McDonagh for, being an excellent composer. But I feel like 15 Coen Brother films would, that sounds a little Coen-y to me.
Well, you mentioned that you're like, as soon as you said that, you're like, oh yeah, this does feel like it's in a Coen Brothers film.
Yeah, just the kind of tones that we're hearing in the soundtrack,
vaguely folky.
And just as a reminder, he didn't do "Oh Brother," which is hilarious considering like that's very folksy.
Yeah, Brother
very
Where Art
country.
Thou. Well, but our Brother Where Art Out, though, I feel like actually leaned more into that was a different type of film for them, because it was like they were writing a different type of, almost like a musical, which is a little different, I think.
Yeah, and I actually was curious. Oh yeah, so T-Bone Burnett worked with the Coens on doing the music for the soundtrack. And of course, like, it has a lot of that. They're not original songs. They're like some of those were hymns and, you know, just produced. But in terms of producing period specific folk music, I really like specifically the score for 3 Billboards. I'm really excited that I have access to all 5 Oscar nominated scores. I own 4 of them, and then Zachary has Last Jedi, so I'm like set on my Oscar nominees for this year. But we must maintain our breakneck pace. If we got to get through the rest of these Oscar nominated scores, you got to hold on to your hankies, folks, for this next song, because we're about to get real. So, what do you think, Caleb? We got the now Oscar-nominated score for The Shape of Water, Princess Without a Voice. This track is called it's track 20. Alexandre Desplat.
Also, he did the last 2 or 3 Harry Potter films, I believe.
Yes, that is correct. He's done Queen, Golden Compass, Curious Case of Benjamin Button, a lot of Twilight movies, Harry Potter, Danish Girl, Moonrise Kingdom, Argo, Rise of the Guardians, Zero Dark 30, New Godzilla 2014, Unbroken, and The Imitation Game.
Okay, we'll get into this movie, but I just want to give a shout out to The Imitation Game score, which is an incredible score, very underrated. Anyway, so on to The Shape of Water. No, I love this score. This is an incredible film score that I think really captures the range of emotions that you experience in the film. There's like the weird thing. It reminds me. It's got that romantic jive, like that classical romance where I think of like Lady and the Tramp, where they're eating the spaghetti. And then
it's the accordion. Yeah, no, it has a lot of French, like that kind of that French stereotype,
romanticism.
Like, romantic overtones to it.
Guillermo del Toro is at heart, he is such a romantic. But he also loves movie monsters, which is why we get The Shape of Water. And it's beautiful, and I think the score's an A+. And I like this piece particularly, but there's other pieces in this soundtrack that are amazing. Yeah, no, I mean the Academy has really done us right this year to have The Shape of Water being the Oscar forerunner. 13 nominations. 13 noms. I mean, that's incredible. From a genre film. Directed by Guillermo del Toro. A man of color starring a mute actress. And about a lady who just wants to do it with the fish. Which, by the way, Doug Jones, we send our love.
Yeah.
We
Oh,
appreciate
yeah.
everything.
I really was sad about Circus. Like, I was trying.
Between Doug Jones and Andy Serkis not getting nominated, you're always like, one day maybe.
One day, maybe the Academy will realize that acting happens in mocap.
Ridiculously good acting.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But I mean, this score is incredible. I feel like I'm being transported into that world when I'm listening to it, and that is one amazing hallmark of an amazing score.
When I just think back, this is the thing. I definitely associate this particular soundtrack with a very specific sequence, which is basically the big iconic romance sequence where they're in the bathroom together and they fill it up with water. And, it's I mean, like it just captures a moment so perfectly.
Yes, it does. And it feels just utterly perfect. And that always makes me quite happy. And also, just moving on to, we have one last score to cover for this very special episode of Soundtrack. Folks, this one, we're not going to be leaving you on a bad note. Here is our last nominee for the 2018 Best Score. Well, there you have it. Our last Oscar nominee for 2018, Phantom Thread, of course, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson. And this was Johnny Greenwood with track 18 for The Hungry Boy, which that's a line from the film.
The Hungry Boy.
Yeah. I really, really like this entire soundtrack, this specific score. It sounds so much like Eric Satie, which is a really incredible classical pianist. He's done, in the works that Satie has done, really influenced, I'd say this is a major influence in what we hear in Phantom Thread. Fun fact, Caleb, about Johnny Greenwood. Johnny Greenwood is the lead guitarist and keyboardist for a little band. I don't know if you've ever heard of them. They're called Radiohead.
What? I love Radiohead.
Yeah, me too. And I had no idea that his part-time job was just scoring really good movies.
You know, between tours and albums, he scores films.
Yeah, his most recent stuff since, so he's done 8 films. He started in 2003 with Body Song. He's done Body Song, There Will Be Blood, Norwegian Wood, We Need to Talk About Kevin, The Master, Inherent Vice, which I still have not seen, and that's been 3 years now.
And it goes by fast.
Phantom Thread and You Were Never Really Here, which actually came out
also
last year.
Joaquin Phoenix, by the way.
Yeah, that has it. Is that hit? Oh, it hit Cannes.
It just can't. It's recent. It's still being.
Oh, it's
right
still
now.
studios.
Yeah.
Oh, it sounds like it's going to be released. It's going to be released in April.
Oh,
here.
I think it actually just played at Sundance.
Okay, I figured we were a little behind, but yes. So he scored You Were Never Really Here, so we have yet
Paul
to
Thomas
hear it out.
Anderson films,
Right?
Yes, okay, that's good. Well, that explains how Paul Thomas Anderson films. His movies are really interesting because he's communicating. He uses the same types of techniques to tell his stories, but his stories are all so very dramatically different from each other.
Tonally. I mean, subject matter, of course.
Subject matter, tone, like the themes are different, like just wildly different. But there's something about all of them when you watch, you're like, oh, I'm watching a Paul Thomas Anderson
You
film.
just know, and that's a mark of an auteur director, is like, you, despite not talking or about the same things, the same types of subjects in your film, I mean, knowing that it's like, oh yes, I am watching his vision of this world.
And I think one of the big traits for his films is his scores, though. Like
for sure.
most of his movies usually have music playing almost all throughout.
Exactly.
And there's a lot of things he does. Sequences, full-blown sequences of him focusing on weird details that you would never ever think of in something. So, in the case of The Phantom Thread, the main character, he's sizing up the woman, he's like taking the measurements. But here's the thing, and it's fetishizing the process, but it's not fetishizing the woman or the body.
It's literally
the process, the measuring.
Process, yeah.
Like, it's so weird. Or and There Will Be Blood, it's the oil rig. How does the oil rig run? Like, there's an entire sequence of like really dramatic, high impact music played throughout that entire sequence.
Exactly.
Like that. And usually it lies through most of the film.
Yeah, and I mean, Johnny Greenwood has done a really good job working with There Will Be Blood, and then this film, two films that have like we said, very different subject matter, but he is like he and Paul Thomas Anderson, of course, and Daniel Day-Lewis are these similar hallmarks throughout both. And I just find both films to still move me in very different ways, but I'm still moved, and I think that's a really important thing to note about Paul Thomas Anderson, and of course of Johnny Greenwood.
Alex, I have one question.
What?
Is this whole talk, is this all about the goddamn asparagus?
Oh my god, that was, if you haven't seen Phantom Thread, that's a deep cut, but if you have, then you're welcome. But yeah, so going back to a question I posed earlier, Caleb, if you had to replace either John Williams' Last Jedi score with a score from 2017, what would you pick?
I'm not going to pick any of those. I'm not going to roll with that game. But I will instead give a shout out to a lot of other films that I think were very worthy of taking that spot.
Very good.
Firstly, Blade Runner 2049, another Hans Zimmer piece, also a collaboration with Benjamin Wallfish. You also have, again, man, criminally forgotten and underrated film altogether, but especially the score from 2017, War for the Planet of the Apes, is an incredible Michael Giacchino score. I would also throw Coco, another Michael Giacchino score. God, I love it.
Coco is really fantastic.
It's got a great score that does a lot of different things and very catchy and uplifting. And there's a couple movements in there that remind me of my favorite video game music. So we've got that. A Ghost Story, which is a Daniel Hart score. Mother. Like, there's a lot of other scores that I think are very worthy of that spot. But at the end of the day, they can't all get nominated, and that's okay. We understand it's a competitive game. Logan's a great score.
And you had actually said something to me once before about Logan that I found really interesting, about your comments between, this is a time to get self-indulgent about the Logan and Wolverine soundtrack, so Go for it.
Well, okay, so Logan's got a really, really great soundtrack. I actually think that the Wolverine, the second one, not Wolverine Origins, the second one set in Japan, is my favorite by a lot. It's because it's still got that Western twist on it, but it's more in line with like a samurai film, and it also incorporates a lot of different elements of Japanese pop culture that I really appreciate. So maybe it's just because it's more my wheelhouse, but I love that score. Logan is more of just a straight up Western, but it does take some of the more Western samurai elements of the Wolverine score are lightly incorporated into the Logan score.
Nice.
And I do appreciate that.
Yeah, that's awesome. And kind of similar in concept to, Williams incorporating themes from every freaking Star Wars movie he's ever made into the score for The Last Jedi. And it would be, it'd be a nice gesture to see that film nominated. Yeah, I mean, I agree with a lot of those picks. I think I feel like I remember liking Call Me By Your Name's soundtrack a lot as well. So the Call Me By Your Name soundtrack is literally more of a soundtrack. It has, but it does have those really great songs by Sufjan Stevens. And I really like that quite a bit. Definitely, you can't, a soundtrack that has multiple authors composing, and it's not a traditional score, but I still deeply appreciate it.
It's got a good soundtrack. Also, sorry, I will shut up. I promise one day.
This is a time.
Another criminally underrated film and just didn't get a lot of media attention or anything. But it did score a Best Animated Feature nomination. Was Loving Vincent. Has an amazing score from Clint Mansell, who's one of my favorites. We also have Good Time, which had a really fascinating experimental soundtrack. That whole movie feels like a music video.
That entire film, what a trip, man.
Yeah.
I like it in a way that I can't quite explain.
Right. It's a fascinating one. So those are just a few. I mean, there are more, sure, but those are some other films that I think are very worthy of a nomination that, again, I'm not going to be upset about Star Wars getting a nomination by any means, but I don't feel like it was Williams' strongest Star Wars outing in the last 20 years.
Yeah, I mean, he won for the titular Star Wars 1977, right?
Yeah, 1977.
Yeah. So he won for the Star Wars, the first Star War. He won for that one.
First War in the Stars.
Good. I would have much rather. He did get in nominations for a whole heck of a lot of good stuff.
He has. He's done
prolific work, amazing work.
Again, him and Spielberg are very much of the same cloth. They have covered so many different types of stories and different types of scores that all feel so radically different from each other. And it's like, how did one person produce so many different types of things? And it's when you look at their body of work, you're like, wow. And yes, prolific and irreparably influential. Like, just contributed so much to film scores. So yeah, I will never speak ill will against John Williams, but I do think there were a lot of better scores this year, and I think there have been better Star Wars scores in the last 20 years.
Yes. Well, that's about our show for this very special episode of Sound Trek. Of course, you can follow us on all of the social medias. You can find me at Alex V. Brohannon on Twitter. You can find me at Brohannon on Coffee. If you want to, put $1 in my tip jar, I'll really appreciate that. You can also follow and find the workings of the Cinematropolis at thecinematropolis.com and all sorts of other places. Caleb, where else can people find you?
Well, you can find me tweeting about all sorts of things leading up to the Oscars, probably more predictions and angst and anxiety about who's going to win, because for the first time in a long time, I don't know who's going to win.
I don't either.
And it's, it's anyone's game. But yes, tweeting about all the good stuff on Twitter at C Masters Talk. That is letter C Masters Talk. Oh, or if you want to see some of my quick movie thoughts, you can always head on over to C Masters 91 on Letterboxd, or for more full length essays and reviews, head on over to thecinematropolis.com.
Sure. And to be, fully self-indulgent, it's a time of great self-indulgence by the Academy and by awards. So we're going to end on a selection from the Your Name soundtrack, or Kimi no Nawa soundtrack. So I'm Alexandra Bohannon. This is Caleb Masters, and we'll soundtrack again with you soon.
ああこのまま僕たちの声が世界の端っこまで消えることなく届いたりしたらいいのにな。そしたらね二人でどんな言葉を花と消えることない約束を二人でせーので言おう。言葉の目をも見れなくなったのは一体いつからだろうか、何故だろうか。ああ雨の止むまさにその切れ間と虹の出発点終